Okay, warriors, another spring bloom that we're going to look at are daffodils. So we have daffodils here in the front, and this is another grouping of daffodils in the back. Looking collectively at both of these groupings of daffodils, you can conclude there is a difference in color as well as a difference in height. And that's just simply referring to the individual characteristics of the species themselves. So both of these groupings of daffodils come from the Narcissus family, and again, that just refers to collective grouping of them being daffodils, but then they do have individual characteristics as they are slightly different. So this grouping back here at the back, these are mini daffodils, so they're going to be a lot shorter. They don't get as tall. They also are completely entirely yellow in color as well, compared to daffodils here at the front. They're going to be much taller. They also then have different colors to their blooms. So if we look, the outer portion of the bloom has a white color to it, compared to the inside portion is more of a pale yellow color. Now you may see some differences amongst different species of daffodils. So sometimes you may find that what is pale yellow here, the center portion of the bloom, sometimes can look a little bit more orange in color, again depending on the species. Other things we know about daffodils are that they are spring bulbs. So that means that beneath the soil, beneath this basal leaf portion or this foliage portion here in the center, beneath the soil we would find a lot of bulbs. So those bulbs are planted in the fall. They're planted in the fall simply because they need that warm soil to kind of help them start growing. But then as winter comes after fall, that's going to allow the bulbs to sleep or go dormant. They then kind of just retain their energy, and then as soon as springtime emerges, those bulbs are going to wake up and send up their shoots. So the shoots that they send up are this green foliage, that green basal leaf to it. From there then it's going to put all of its energy into producing the blooms that we see in the many different colors. Other distinguishing characteristic with daffodils, not only do they emerge first, sometimes they're the first sign of spring, so we see them often the end of March, very beginning of April. Other spring bulbs are a little bit later, so they are the very first sign of spring. Other distinguishing characteristic about daffodils, the bloom itself. When we look at the bloom, if we look at this side view here, you can see that it's kind of offset. It does not grow directly straight up, rather it's to an angle to the side. So the blooms of daffodils, we call them a trumpet bloom, and that just refers to the orientation or the shape of that bloom. Again, your other spring bulbs may not have that trumpet bloom to them, rather they will grow directly upright. So that's another distinguishing characteristic. Something else that you will see differently amongst some other spring blooms that we will eventually talk about are the basal leaves. So again, if we're looking at this green foliage here, you can see the veins going through, but with the green foliage of daffodils, it's rather thin. So it's not heavy, but also it's not overly wide as well. So these are pretty thin strips of the green basal leaves or the foliage, and we'll talk about the difference then as we look at some other spring bulbs. Additionally, another key characteristic to daffodils, if we look more closely here at the bloom, let's look this way here. So we can see inside the bloom we have the male and the female parts. Therefore, that tells us that this daffodil is a complete flower because it does contain both the male and the female parts. So if I look at it from a different angle, I can see that item that is furthest upright, kind of stretching to the center point. That is going to be the stigma. So as we know, the stigma is coming from the pistil, and that is the female reproductive part. Then on the side of the stigma, kind of a little bit lower, we have the male reproductive parts. So those items are going to be providing the pollen, and then when the pollen attracts to the sticky stigma on the top, that then creates the complete bloom, creating the pollination, fertilization of that complete flower.